give you a minute, and you don't have to, but I find it's, we used to do it at some other churches, and here at Thanksgiving, just to give somebody a chance to maybe just vocally, we don't need to have you do a 10-minute spiel, but we'd like to give you an opportunity for you to, if you got something you'd like to say about the blessing God has bestowed upon you and your family, give you an opportunity. So anybody want to say a word?
I thank God for my salvation. It had been for Jesus Christ willing to do what the Father wanted him to do, I wouldn't have the assurance of eternal life.
Absolutely. Yes?
When I got shot in Vietnam, at the time, I didn't think that much about it for a while. Right after I got shot, I just felt like I was dying. Literally. I was sitting in about 10 inches of water, and I just put my hands up to the sky, and I said, Lord, if you will have me, I want to go to heaven right now. And within a second or two, I got just as calm, and the next thing is it smelled like 1,000,000 flowers. I've asked doctors and other people, does blood smell like flowers? They say it smells like metal. Weeks and weeks and weeks later, I'm in a hospital in Japan. I'm on a ward, and everybody's amputees. Dr. Cunningham, he told me that they considered amputating my shoulder from the neck down the arm. He said, none of us ever done an operation that complicated. He said, but there's no need for us to do it. He said, we've done everything we can. We cannot give you any more antibiotics. It'll kill you. He said, so I'm telling you this so you can get yourself right for the Lord. He said, you're going to pass away tonight before 12 o'clock. And I looked at him and I said, no, I know something is wrong. He walked in the next morning, I could see him right now. He just stood there and looked at me, and all of a sudden, he didn't say nothing. He just kept doing that, and all of a sudden he said, I had nothing to do with this, the nurses didn't have nothing to do with it. He said, you got the best doctor anywhere in this whole world.
Praise the Lord.
Nobody that could have saved you last night but him.
Hallelujah. Praise the Lord.
I wouldn't be here today if it weren't for him, and then I can go on and tell you about some other things.
That's right.
That happened to a lot of times when I weren't doing right for the Lord or something, just the way I was sitting there. It just felt like somebody had a staff pushing me back on my pain.
He had a plan for your life. Did. Absolutely did.
A long time to realize
That's right.
he did have a plan. I had a friend, and I asked him about it. He was in combat and all that stuff. He said, "I'll tell you something. The Lord singled you out." He said, "You weren't going to die." He said, he didn't plan for you to die.
And he had you here to share your story just like you're doing tonight. Somebody needs to hear.
Now I'm not afraid to tell people that.
That's right.
I don't believe it, but I believe it. I'll testify to it everywhere I go.
That's absolutely. Well, thank you, Dale, for sharing that. Who else got a word?
Hey, I want to thank the Lord for every blessing that he's ever bestowed upon me and my family. Until we get to the point in our relationship and with the Lord to know that he holds our breath.
Absolutely.
There's so many that don't get it, but as we've, I'm just so thankful. Like Adam, I'm glad that he was obedient to the Father, that he gave his life for me.
That's right.
I struggle and mess up every day, but I just thank you for every blessing in life. So.
Anybody else?
I'd like to thank the Lord for being so patient and gentle and kind. I think back to a time before I moved here back in 2014, and I had no clue where I was going. But I just knew my life had to change. I .44 Magnum, and I sat and looked at it. And I put a bullet in it, and I started spinning around the chamber. And I thought, what is the point of this God? And it's not the first time I've done things in that manner. And there's a couple other stories, but he gave me this little dog. My wife we didn't want kids, and my wife, I said, well, if I get dogs, my wife will get preoccupied a few years before. And I had this little dog that was just something about him. He started making me awakening to problems that I'd had when I was a kid, when I'd look him in the eye and it didn't work. And that little dog sat and paced around me while I sat there in my bedroom. I just broke down. I was like, I can't do this. I can't do this to my wife. She's been through so much. She waited for me for so long when I decided to go off on my own journey. And I called her at work, and I said, I can't do this. I can't. And I told her what I was about to do, and she just lost it. And we both decided just to make a major change in our life and do something different than we'd ever done. And I never thought I'd be in the situation that I'm in now. Last thing I ever wanted to do. The restaurant business was the worst, one of the worst decisions I ever made in my career. So many other things I could have done, but it's just amazing to realize when you can become in a personal relationship with Jesus, how patient and how he touches each person individually. And how important it is. And I know it's hard to let people know because most people don't want to hear it. That it's totally about come as you are, and he'll make you the way you need to be. It might take a while. It took me a few years. But when I've learned to develop a personal relationship, and I go through hard times, and I think I got it. I think I can do most things in my life by myself. And then it becomes overwhelming. You get that mountain ahead of you. That's when you realize that if you do get on your knees and you talk to Jesus personally, as today I was about to lose my ever-loving mind with all the things that I got to do and how things have piled up. But I experienced the Holy Spirit today. And he told me some stuff of what to do, and I just didn't believe how simple it could be and how I can't just rely on myself and think that I can fix everything. And in the moment, and I'm just so thankful that he was as patient with me as he was and let me be a total donkey most of my life. You know, you can't stop the horse, and you can't make the donkey go. Give it to God. I'll show you what to do.
And we've been talking to Eric and about the business, and business is a struggle, especially during the times we are and everything. And I told Eric and Faith when they was there, I says, why don't you just give it to God? Let God have this business. And just work.
She said something to me the other day. She said, you're really giving it to God. I know you were saying something about it. I said, I'm trying. I said, man,
don't grab it back.
Pride, but
you just work there.
Run everything by yourself. You get lost in it, whether you realize you have it or not. And she's like, I can really tell there's something going on. Like people are coming in here, and I'm just like, well, just let me stay in the back so I don't scare them off.
Yes. And what it is, business has picked up some now. It might be the holiday time and everything, but Eric is getting to experience God at work. And he loves he tells us all the time how much he loves his new church family that he's got here and stuff. And so it's been good for Eric. And y'all embrace Eric. And when you want a good meal, Eric can cook now. Y'all seen how good them grits and shrimp we had out here and stuff. And he's really doing a good job, got a good heart.
I do appreciate everybody here a lot. It's been hard my whole life to appreciate anything. I've been looking a long time.
That's right.
Even through some different churches.
That's right. Well, you home now, brother.
I love you people.
You home. Who else? Anybody else? Just want you to have opportunity. I don't share a lot to have this opportunity. Anybody else?
I just want to thank God for where I'm at in my life in my senior years. I was lost and gone, and I'm back today.
Mm-hmm.
I just thank God for my family, for Elaine in my life. She helped me out with all my struggles.
I'll say for that. And it's always good as we get older to have our family come around. Your family's close. Y'all been able to blend two families together, show it can work, and it's been great. Anybody else?
I just want to stop thanking the Lord. He blessed me. Businesses get tough, but like, all you can do is do the best you can and give it to God. I mean, that's it. And that's what I have to do every day.
That's right.
Work for myself. Like I said, he shows up right when he needs to. That's the way to try to live my life. Like I said, I hadn't missed any meals or left me able to pay my bills.
And you definitely, I've been walking with you. You had your struggles, and you had slap downs, and finally thought we found something, and then that shut, and then you found something else, and then that didn't work out. But you know what I can say about you? You persevered.
You have to give God and go on.
That's right.
That's all you can do.
When that door shut, you said, "All right, God, what about this?" You just kept going, and God.
Just can't give up.
That's right.
You know, that's what it takes.
That's it. Who else? Anybody else?
Which I'm thankful that we have plenty to eat. When I was coming up, we were poor. There were 5 of us that lived in a 16 by 32 house. We had love, had plenty to eat. My dad was a hunter and fisher. Had fresh fish to eat all anytime. I remember one time, he said, "Don," he said, "help me catch that old Tom turkey we were having for Thanksgiving." And we was throwing some corn there, and he grabbed one leg of the turkey. That turkey flew up in his chest and was beaten. He took that other foot and come down across his eye, just like that. And he held on to him right on, and we croned him down. And next to a wood pile, and I grabbed the axe and cut his head off. And we dressed him. We had some baby scales, and he dressed 25 pounds. That's how
Wow.
big he was.
Wow.
One of them old white ones, you know.
Uh-huh.
But things like that you remember, you know.
Yeah. Just out of curiosity, after your daddy got hit like that, did he tell you, "Kill him, Donnie, kill him, kill him, kill him"?
He had that axe. He cut him across the-
I can see your daddy, "Kill him, Donnie."
His face was bloody. He held on to that turkey. But we always had plenty to eat. Mama tell us boys, she said, "I'll cook anything y'all kill except for possum. Don't bring a possum up here, I won't cook it."
Very briefly, I'll tell you a story. Daddy always wanted to kill one of them wild turkeys. And his dad says, "I don't know why them birds are so smart." So when it's hunting season, they disappear. He said, "I'm going to get me one before the hunting season go out." And they standing out there like they know. So Daddy went one day and he said, I got one. I said, "What you want to do with them?" He said, let's skin feather them, and let's eat them. So we didn't know about wild turkeys that you're supposed to just pop the breast out. So we cooked the whole thing. And Dad says, "Try one of them long legs, son. They look good, don't you?" And I took that long leg. It was so tough you couldn't hardly bite into it. and Daddy looked at me. He says, "What's wrong, son?" I said, "Daddy, you try it and stuff here." We learned then, you pop the breast out and let the rest. That bird's run around so much and gone. He's tough as shoe leather. So, but that's a good experience too. Who else got a word you want to say?
One thing I like to say is thank the Lord for all the many blessings in life. I've come to realize also that the good things I once took for granted are blessings from God.
Absolutely.
Things that are long suffering and patience with me.
That's right.
Blessings in my life. I'm very blessed.
Thank you, Thomas. Anybody else?
I can thank God for many things, but I said it before my testimony before, but one of the main things I can thank for is that job I have.
He's put you around a lot of godly men, ain't he? And stuff there, so that's great.
Especially where I work at, I needed that.
That's great. Anybody else?
Thankful for a healthy family and healthy children, good wife. There was a time that I didn't think that that was something that would be in my cards. Just thankful that the right paths led to each other, and, you know, we finally let the Lord have control. You talk about it, sometimes you just gotta hush your mouth and sit down, and he'll put you where you need to go.
Absolutely. Anybody else?
Absolutely thankful for God's grace, because when you walk through your whole life, just kind of knowing He's there and taking it for granted, but still living the life you want to live, and of course, indulging in earthly and worldly things, and behaving how you want to behave. And when you are ready to walk the path to Him, you don't feel worthy, but His grace just
Amen.
develops you.
Amen.
So absolutely thankful for God's grace.
Anybody else?
There's so much we can be thankful for. And I know as we get older, everybody wants to live more and more. Well, all my life, I don't know why I never dreamed I'd be 50 years old. And when I turned 50, I cried because my dad never thought I'd see it. But in doing that, it conditioned me to believe that I was okay in that. So now I'm 60, I've got 10 years of my life I never thought I would see. 4 of my 5 grandchildren have been born in that 10 years. So, you know, I'm seeing things that I never thought I would see. I'm living days I never thought I would live. The Lord's blessed me well with a family, with a wife. How can we thank Him for all that He's done? How can we thank Him too much? I mean, He loves us so much that He gives us all these things, even though we never dreamed we would have. He gives us more than we really can imagine that He ever would.
That's right. Anybody else?
I want to thank God for His many blessings that He's given to me. It'd take all night for me to thank Him for everything that He has given to me, but I have to thank Him for my family and my children, and that we're all coming to church and
Amen.
trying to worship Him in every way we can.
Got a son and a grandson going into the ministry. A lot to be thankful for. Anybody else? If not, I want to share one thing before we get to chapter 22 in 1 Samuel. There's times in our life that God allows you to experience something that's life-changing. I got a guy that's not here anymore, but being around him after I finally decided I was going to get back in church and stay on that straight and narrow path as we talked about. But God puts people in your lives to help you grow and experience. Some of you know him, some of you don't. Andy Strickland went to Cedar Creek Baptist Church. Andy was a lot like us. One day he was going to work. He drove a gas truck at Battle Gas. And he decided while he was going to get to work that morning, he decided to stop at a country store to get him a drink. So he pulled the gas truck. As he was going to the place to get the gas truck, he stopped there with his vehicle beside the road. And when he got out of the vehicle, he pulled off, and it was one of them stores you just pull right off the main road, and there it was. So he pulled off the road, and he got out of his truck, and he began to walk around his truck to go when a girl was coming by that had dropped a bottle in the foot of her car. And she'd reached down to get that bottle at the foot of that car, and it veered off the road. And Andy had his back to it and didn't see him coming. And she hit Andy and drug him more than 300 feet down the road. Andy should not be alive. He was found underneath the car in the ditch, all muddy, could not even tell anything about him, and taken to the hospital. But Andy survived. But Andy was paralyzed from the waist down. I could not understand when we sat at church and we had times like this. Andy would be the first one. When you open the floor up, when the preacher opened the floor up about blessings and that, and Andy would say, this is what he would say. And I could never understand it. God has been so good to me. That was his words. So one day I said, Andy, you got this plane. And he didn't say a whole lot else. He just said, God has been so good to me. Thank you for his family. Thank you for his wife and all those things. I said, Andy, I got to understand. He says, well, he said, Dale, I could have died. My children were 3 and 1 years old. And I said, I could have died, but God let me live. And even though I'm in a wheelchair and I'm not like I would like to be, God left me here. Even after that, when his son turned 15 years of age, he was trying to help some other boys get a horse in that got out of his pasture. And his son was on a four-wheeler riding around. And while he was trying to chase the horse on the four-wheeler, a horse kicked up and kicked his son right dead in the chest. If anybody would have known how to start a heart back, he might would have lived because he looked perfectly fine. But the lick to his chest was so great it stopped his heart on a dime. All the other boys knew what to do was to pick him up and carry him to Andy and say something's wrong with him. His name was Austin. And they carried him to Andy, and Andy tried to do what he could to him and his wife, and they called the ambulance, but his son died. And he was still at that time. I knew his son had died. I knew he was in a wheelchair, and yet I was at church, and I was hearing Andy say, God has been so good to me. I just couldn't understand. I said, how can a man, and here I am, not there, not saying anything, not giving God any praise, and here's a man who went through all this. And so he told me about his accident and God being a blessing to him, letting him live. But here's what he told me about my son. He said, what you don't realize that I'm so thankful for, 3 weeks before my son died, he gave his heart to Jesus Christ. And I am so thankful when I say God is so good to me, because my son could have died and I wouldn't know where he's at. But I know where my son's at. Do I hurt every day? Because it was like my legs was taken from me twice. My son finally got to the age he was able to help me do things, because Andy, he didn't give up. He started a wood making business and making all kind of nice things and for people and signs and doing those things. And he just never gave up. He just kept going. And then he had to endure that. And I would always, when I was at Cedar Creek Baptist Church, I would take it upon myself to help his wife out, to make sure I'd help him get to the car and help him get into the church. And I'd make sure they got back and got the wheelchair loaded up and everything. And if people could see the effort that he had to put to come to church every Sunday, I think it would change a lot of people from just staying home and not coming to church. Because it was an absolute effort for him to be able to get there and come to church. But as I think about my blessings, I think about Andy every Thanksgiving. My friend's gone. And what I hate so much about it, he died right in the midst of COVID. Right when COVID just started, he died. And I had to go preach his funeral. And we couldn't give him a proper funeral like he deserved because nobody knew what to do. It was just me and his wife and the immediate family, and that was it. But I still could hear Andy. When the preacher asked him, has anybody got a word you'd like to say? I can still see Andy raise his hand right there. And I can still hear him say, God has been so good to me. I wanted to share that with you tonight. And hoping sometimes maybe when you're having a tough day, you'll think back on my dear friend Andy, who endured a lot, but he still could say, God has been so good to me. Let's look at the Bible tonight. 1 Samuel chapter 22. You remember the last time David had to leave. You got a chance to turn on Facebook, let me know. We're starting in 1 Samuel. We had a little time here at the church, in case you were wondering where we were. We had a little time at the church where we're doing, giving everybody an opportunity to give a little testimony and give a little praise to God here at Thanksgiving. And we're in chapter 22 tonight. And As we talked last time, David has had to leave because Saul is trying to kill him. Him and Jonathan has made a pact, and Jonathan told him he needed to go. And we see that David, last time in chapter 21, he had went to the priest Ahimelech, and him and the few men that he had with him needed something to eat, and he was telling him he was on the king's business, and he only had the showbread, and to give him that. But there's something I wanted to point out tonight to you as we go into chapter 22, and that's in verse 7 of chapter 21. There was one individual that saw him there that day. Now a certain man of the servants of Saul had one of his men there that day, detained before the Lord, and his name was Doeg, an Edomite, the chiefest of the herdmen that belonged to Saul. It's important. David didn't do anything to him. David saw him there. David probably felt uncomfortable by him being there, but David didn't say or do anything. But I want you to remember that because it's going to play a big part in what we're going to talk about here in chapter 22. Now it says that after that, David went to a place called Gath, and he was afraid in verses 10 through 15. He was afraid that the king was going to do something there. So you remember the last thing we talked about, David began acting like a madman. So the king would say, get him away from me. Why would you bring somebody like you? Because he got fearful about who he could trust and who he could not trust. So now we come to chapter 22. After catching you up on all that, David flees to Adullam. David therefore departed thence and escaped to the cave of Adullam. And when his brethren and all his father's house heard it, they went down thither to him. And everyone that was in distress, and everyone that was in debt, and everyone that was disconnected gathered themselves unto him, and he became a captain over them, and there were with him about 400 men. All right, let's pause there a second. So his mother and father heard where he was at. They came to him. Everybody who didn't like Saul, if you owed somebody money, if you saw they did something wrong to you, everyone that was really didn't like Saul, they said, well, David, Saul's trying to kill him. Let's go to David and let's help David. And so he had as many as 400 men come to him to be part of his army at that present time. But David, and it's very important to look in verse 3, David had an obligation. Kings at that time would not only punish David, but he would also punish everybody associated with David. And David was worried about his mom and daddy. So in verse 3, look what David did. And David went thence to Mizpah of Moab, which was another place that did not like Saul. And since he didn't like Saul, he knew Saul would not go there and bother anything because he knew that Saul would have a fight. So he said unto the king of Moab, let my father and my mother, I pray thee, come forth and be with you till I know what God will do for me. David could not do what he needed to do until he knew for sure that his mom and daddy was in a safe place. He could not go and fight and do everything that he needed to do until he had that full assurance. So here he took care of mom and dad, and that's very important because the Bible says that we should honor thy father and mother. You know, it's hard for me. Y'all pray for me. I see my mama declining right before my very eyes. I know there's a day coming real soon that there's going to be some tough decisions and tough things we have to do. I left tonight to call her to make sure she didn't forget to take her medicine tonight and do those things. Because it's my responsibility. I'm the only child. It's my responsibility to make sure I take care of mom, make sure she's looked after. And if I need some help, then I'll get some help from the outside. And I tell people all the time, there's nothing wrong with getting help. That's what David did. David knew doing what he had to do, he could not take care of mother and father. But he made sure that somebody else was. What did Jesus do on the cross? Do you remember? What did he tell John? John, behold your mother. He wanted to make sure, even though he was dying on the cross, that his biological mother here on earth was taken care of. It's our obligation. And he brought them before the king of Moab, and they dwelt with him all the while that David was in the hold. What does it mean about in the hold? He was in a stronghold, a safe place. He had to be out in the environment. He couldn't be in the towns and the comforts of the nice place. He had to be out in the woods, hiding in caves and stuff so that Saul could not find him. And the prophet Gad said unto David, abide not in the hold, depart, and get thee into the land of Judah. Then it said David departed and came into the forest of Herath. So even though he was at a place here, the king there told him, so that's not a good place for you here. You got to get out into the nowhere land where Saul wouldn't even know where to look for you at, where nobody sees you, nobody knows where you're at. So look at what happens next. When Saul heard that David was discovered and that the men were with him, now Saul abode in Gilboa under a tree in Ramah, having his spear in his hand, and all of his servants were standing about him. Now Saul is beside himself. He knows in his heart that Jonathan's having something to do with David. And he don't like that. And what he don't like besides that is nobody would tell him. Saul's looking at, nobody's got compassion on me. Everybody's covering up for Jonathan. Everybody's covering up for David. And I just want you to know, Saul, he's getting tired of it. So watch. Then Saul said unto his servants that stood about him, hear now me, ye Benjamites. This is the way he talks. He's aggravated with them. Will the son of Jesse give every one of you fields and vineyards and make you all captains of thousands and captains of hundreds? Now the son of Jesse is David. He's saying, all y'all trying to cover up for him. He's not king. I'm king. Can David give you anything? He don't have anything he can give you. But I'm king. So he's trying to show them, you should honor me while you're honoring David. That all of you have conspired against me. So Saul's mad. And there is none that showeth me that my son hath made a league with the son of Jesse. See, Saul says, I know Jonathan and David's got a pact together, but none of y'all will tell me that. And Jonathan sure won't tell me. And they made a league with son, and there is none of you that is sorry for me. Oh, Saul's just having a regular old pity party. Or showeth unto me that my son has stirred up my servant against me to lie in wait at this day. He's not only mad at his servants, he's mad at his son Jonathan, but he can't do anything real bad to Jonathan. That's his son. That would look bad if the king killed his son, even though he's already thrown his spear at him and tried to kill him. So then answered Dog. You remember we already talked about him in the other one. Then answered Dog the Edomite, which was sat under the servants of Saul, and said, I saw him, the son of Jesse, coming to Nob, and to Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub. Now this is the priest. David was weary when he saw him, and now we see that he's been ratted out. Somebody finally spoke up. And so he inquired of the Lord for him and gave him victuals and gave him the sword of Goliath and Philistines. Dog told him, says, I saw him. He talked to Ahimelech, and Ahimelech gave him the sword of Goliath, gave him bread to eat. He took care of him. And boy, Saul was just getting madder and madder and madder. Then the king sent to call for Ahimelech, the priest, the son of Ahitub, and all his father's house, and the priests that were in Nob, and they came all of them to the king. He said, don't just bring me him, bring me his whole family, every one of them. I want them all to come to me. I'm going to get to the bottom of this. I'm going to find out what they did, why they did it, and we're going to solve this. And Saul said this, hear now, thou son of Ahitub. And he answered, and said to him, Ahimelech said to him, here I am, my lord. And Saul said unto him, why have you conspired against me? Thou and the son of Jesse, and that thou hast given him bread, you've given him a sword, and you have even went to the Lord for him. You hast inquired of God for him, that he should rise against me to lie in wait at this day. Saul, he was hot. But Ahimelech really didn't know anything about it. When David come, he thought David was the son-in-law, which he was, of Saul. He thought David was working on behalf of the king. That's what you remember David lied? You remember he lied to him and told him he was about the king's business, and I need this for the king's business, and I can't tell you a whole lot. So he's got a hand in this too now. Then I began to inquire of God. Then Ahimelech answered and said, and who is so faithful among all thy servants as David, which is the king's son-in-law? Ahimelech said, Saul, man, that's your son-in-law you're talking about that I did these things with. And goeth at thy bidding and is honorable in thy house. He says, Saul, this isn't the first time David's done something for you in your place. You know, he's come and done that. Why would I suspect? I've not conspired against you in any way. He says, because David come to me and asked for that, then he says in verse 15, then I began to inquire of God for him because he asked me to. Be it far from me, let not the king impute anything unto his servant, nor to all the house of my father. For thy servant knew nothing of all this, less or more. Ahimelech is saying, Saul, I knew nothing. And Ahimelech was telling the truth. He did not know anything about what David was trying to do. And the king said, thou shalt surely die, Ahimelech, thou and all thy father's house. The king has spoken. He didn't believe one word to Ahimelech. He was so mad that David was getting away and that somebody might have helped David, and he couldn't find David because he'd been looking for David. He couldn't find David. So finally he says, I'm going to kill all these priests. These were God's priests. Now watch what happens. The king has a set of footmen that goes along with him when he travels. These is his bodyguards, like the president has as people that's around him to protect him, the Secret Service. This is the king's foot guards. And the king said unto the footmen that stood about him, that was his most loyal servants. That's the ones that's around the king, that no matter what the king says for them to do, they protect the king, they give their life for the king. He tells them, turn, slay the priests of the Lord, because their hand also is with David, and because they knew when he fled and did not show it to me. But the servants of the king would not put forth their hand to fall upon the priests of the Lord. His own one says, no, king. We know you king and stuff, but we ain't touching God's people. So they absolutely refuse. But there's one that will not. Guess who that is? Look in verse 18. And the king said to Duke, turn thou, because he was head of the other group, turn now and fall upon the priests. And Duke the Edomite turned, and he fell upon the priest. And he slew on that day 85, that's 85, that did wear a linen ephod that day. Those godly people that God had chosen to do his work, Saul had killed. We already talked about how far Saul had gone. He's just today took a different turn when he started killing God's own people. It showed that he had no part of God in him. His anger and wrath just consumed him. And Nob, the city of the priests, smote he with the edge of the sword. Not only did he kill the 85, now watch in verse 19. The city they lived in, he went there, dog did, and the priest smote with the edge of the sword both the men and women, children and sucklings and oxen and asses and sheep with the edge of the sword. He wiped out the whole place of Nob, all because they helped David. And one of the sons of Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub, named Abiathar, he escaped. And immediately he ran to David. And Abiathar showed David that Saul had slain the Lord's priest. And watch what David said. And David said to Abiathar, I knew it that day when Duke the Edomite was there, that he would surely tell Saul. You ever had a feeling that something was going to happen? Then it did come to happen. There's David. And David says something here that he's going to have to live with. I have occasion, or in other words, I have caused the death of all the persons of thy father's house. He's telling that to the Abiathar, which came and told David about what happens to Abiathar. All your family's gone, and you're looking at the man who caused all of that. So he tells them in verse 23, I want you to abide thou with me. Fear not, for he that seeketh my life seeketh thy life. But with me thou shalt be in a safeguard. He says, stay with me. You'll be protected. I'll look after you. I'll take care of you. In chapter 23 now, we see that David then has got to be able to put that behind him. I'm just going to tell you, when I read this and I felt David's pain, when he had to look at the guy and said, I've caused the death of your father and of your family and the women, not only just the priests, but the women, the children, just wiped them all out. And David had to live with that. People, I'm here to tell you, if it ain't for the grace of God, which you talked about, there's no way to get past what happened with David and the guilt that he had to underscore. There's no way that he had to seek God. Now watch here, and we won't have time to do all of 23, but let's see how far we can go. Then they told David, saying, behold, the Philistines. You remember, I already fought the Philistines one time, Goliath. They still around. They didn't wipe them out. The Philistines fought against Keilah, and they robbed the threshing floors. And this is David's people also, and he's heard about the Philistines going in there and robbing from the people from the threshing floor the food that they've got to eat. And if they don't have that food, then they're going to starve. Therefore David, did he just go? No. Look what he did. Therefore David inquired of the Lord, saying, shall I go and smite these Philistines? And the Lord said unto David, go and smite the Philistines and save Keilah. And David's men said unto him, behold, we be afraid here in Judah. How much more then if we come to Keilah against the armies of the Philistines? So the men says, I don't know, David, about going to fight the Philistines. We're sort of scared here. Then David inquired of the Lord yet again. And the Lord answered him and said, arise, go down to Keilah, for I will deliver the Philistines into thine hand. So he sought. For first himself should I go. Then he went to his men and said, we're going down to the Keilah to fight the Philistines. And his men said, well, we're a little afraid to go. He said, well, let's come ask the Lord if he'll give us the victory. And God says, I'll give you the victory. So David and his men went to Keilah, fought with the Philistines, and brought away their cattle, and smote them with a great slaughter. So David saved the inhabitants of Keilah. Now we see here that Saul is still after David. Even though he's wiped out Ahimelech and all that whole group that he felt betrayed him was helping David, Saul did not give up his pursuing David. And it came to pass when Abiathar, he is the one priest out of the group that survived, the son of Ahimelech, fled to David to Keilah, that he came down with an ephod in his hand. Do you understand what an ephod is? An ephod is what they used, and you can read about it in Exodus chapter 28, verses 6 through 30 if you want to later. But it's what they use inside the ephod in a ephod in a pack. It's what they call a Urim and Thummim. Two different shaped things. And the priest then would take that and throw it on the ground, not like dice, but it was made in a way, and you can read more about it then. I'm just going to give you a very brief description. But it was a way the priest would be able to talk with God when David needed to know something, and it would give him the answer. And they took the ephod anytime they had something they needed to ask the Lord, and you would ask the Lord this way, and the priest would take that and use it. And so it was told Saul that David was come to Keilah, and Saul said, God hath delivered him into my hand, for he is shut in by entering into a town that hath gates and bars. So Saul now has got a report where David is. He says, man, I got him now. There's no way for him to get out. But watch. And Saul called all the people together to go to war, to go down to Keilah, to besiege David and his men. But David knew that Saul secretly practiced mischief against him. And he said to Abiathar the priest, bring hither the ephod. He's asking, we got to know something of God now because our lives is in danger. Then said David, O Lord God of Israel, thy servant has certainly heard that Saul seeketh to come to Keilah, to destroy the city for my sake. I need to know, Lord, will the men of Keilah deliver me up into his hand? This is what David wants to know of God. And will Saul come down as thy servant hath heard? O Lord God of Israel, I beseech thee, tell thy servant, and let the Lord. And the Lord said, he will come down. Then said David, will the men of Keilah, once Saul comes down, will the men of Keilah deliver me and my men into the hand of Saul? And the Lord once again told him, they will deliver you up. So we're going to stop there, and we'll pick back up in verse 13. If you really, this is just, to me, good stuff. You just read and get into the picture and imagine David and his men there and Saul after him. And if you'll just focus on that, you won't wait to see what's going to happen next time we come together. You'll go ahead and read ahead, and you'll know already, and we can talk about it together there and stuff. But we'll start there in verse 13 and everything. Since we didn't sing a song before, can we share? Can you come play a song, and we'll sing one closing, just in case somebody, for whatever reason. We know we had a lot of people come